stage appearances or when he would go on tour, you couldn't help but fall in love with him.
Don't procrastinate, don't articulate.
He just seemed to have it all. He was every general's soldier. He was every son to every mother. I mean, he just connected. He connected.
When the king of rock and roll leaves his queen in the shadows, invisibility sets in. This isn't just fame or fortune, it's the pain of being unseen by someone who once made you their world. Priscilla Presley felt this ache deeply. One night, before thousands, she made a daring move that stopped Elvis in the crowd, blending romance and humiliation. Yet this act revealed something deeper. Behind Graceland's glamour was a hollow home where Elvis's legend reigned, but his presence was distant. Priscilla's story uncovers the unseen struggle behind the spotlight, challenging what you thought about that infamous moment. Priscilla had been just 14 when she first met Elvis, a teenager swept into a world she didn't understand, orbiting a man whose fame was bigger than life itself. At first, every look he gave her made her feel like she was the only girl in the universe, but that warmth faded. Not all at once, but slowly, over time, like a favorite song that stops giving you chills. As Elvis's career exploded, so did the distance between them. What started as passion began to feel like scheduling. He was everywhere, on TV, on tour, in magazines, but rarely in the same room. And when he was home, it didn't feel like he really was. He'd stay up all night with his entourage, the guys, as Priscilla called them, laughing, playing music, disappearing into rooms that might as well have been galaxies away. She would wait, then go to bed alone, again. Dinners were often skipped, conversation shortened, affection became routine, almost rehearsed. It was like she was living backstage in someone else's show, quietly rehearsing a role she no longer understood. There were little moments, tiny cracks that let the sadness seep in, like the time she spent hours getting ready for a dinner that Elvis canceled without a word, or the way he'd answer her with a smile for his friends, then barely look at her when they were alone. 1,000 small ways to say, "You're here, but I'm not really seeing you." And yet, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she loved him. Because she believed, like many of us do, that love could fix the silence. That maybe, just maybe, the next moment would be different. That he'd look up and say something real. But love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet ache of watching someone you adore slip further away while you sit in the same room. Sometimes it's the slow realization that the spotlight they live under doesn't have room for both of you. People forget. Priscilla didn't grow up in Hollywood. She was a military kid, raised with structure, modesty, rules. She wasn't chasing fame. Fame found her, and then fame left her behind. Her world became a balancing act. Smile for the cameras. Stay poised. Be the perfect wife. But behind closed doors, she was unraveling. Not in scandal, not in rage, but in loneliness. A kind of loneliness that no mansion could cure. She started noticing things. The emotional crumbs she was being fed. The way she had to compete. Not with other women necessarily, but with the image. With Elvis's own legend. How do you stay real in a relationship where one person belongs to millions? There were days when she'd ask herself, what happened to the boy who held my hand in the dark and made me laugh when no one else could? That boy wasn't gone, but he had become a man weighed down by pressure, painkillers, and the expectations of a world that wanted him to keep performing. Always performing. And still, Priscilla tried. She dressed up. She made herself beautiful. She stayed by his side, but her gestures started to feel invisible. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't compete with the roar of the crowd, the demands of the stage, the chaos of being Elvis. Until one day, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just about being hurt, it was about being erased. She realized she didn't just want to be seen again, she needed it, not for attention, not for glory, but to remind him and maybe herself that she still existed. Which brings us to that moment, that infamous night, the disguise, the stage, the risk. But here's the thing, that wasn't just a prank. It wasn't just a jealous wife pulling a stunt. It was a message built on years of being pushed aside. A final, fearless move by someone who had spent too long waiting in the wings. So let me ask you this. When someone you love stops seeing you, what would you do to be noticed again? This wasn't a last-minute idea. It was a slow, simmering decision, one that built up over weeks, maybe even months. Priscilla had been patient, quiet, careful, but deep inside, something was cracking. And one night, when the loneliness got loud enough, she made a choice. She was going to crash his stage, not with drama, not with anger, but with precision, with style, with just enough risk to wake him up. She didn't tell anyone, not her friends, not his staff. This had to be hers. If she got caught or shut down before she made it to him, so be it. But if it worked, maybe, just maybe, he'd finally look at her like he used to. She chose the dress carefully. A sleek black number that hugged her frame just right. Nothing too flashy, but just daring enough to make someone's breath catch. The back plunged low, scandalously low, and over it she layered her secret weapon, a dark hooded cloak. It made her almost unrecognizable, especially in the chaos of the crowd. She styled her hair so that it draped perfectly down her back, long, thick, covering the dress's thin straps. From a distance, it looked like she was bare. That was the illusion, the bait, the question in the audience's mind. She knew what she was doing, and yet, her hands still trembled as she tied the hood under her chin. The concert was like all the others, blinding lights, thunderous applause, Elvis glowing on stage like a god in motion. Women screamed his name. Security held back crowds that surged forward like waves. It was loud, electric, almost violent in its energy. She stayed back at first, hidden in the mass of bodies swaying and shouting. Her heart beat faster with every passing minute. She told herself she was doing this for fun, for connection, for the thrill. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't about fun. This was a lifeline. Elvis, in one of his usual flirtatious moments, signaled for women to come up. It was one of his signature bits, a playful kissing ritual where fans would climb the stage for a brief, cheeky kiss. The crowd went wild every time, and this time Priscilla joined them. Step by step, she moved forward, her cloak tight around her, eyes on the man she loved, the man who hadn't really looked at her in months. As she climbed up with the others, something strange happened. Her fear gave way to adrenaline. Her sadness turned into determination. It wasn't just a bold move, it was a declaration. Will he see me now, she asked herself. Not just glance, not just perform. See me. The stage lights made it hard for anyone to truly make out details. The cloak, the hair, the silhouette, it all added to the illusion. She looked almost surreal. Some people in the audience squinted, unsure what they were looking at. And then it started. Little ripples of confusion, whispers, then laughter, then gasps. A few people genuinely thought they were seeing a topless woman on stage with Elvis Presley. Security began shifting. Eyes darted. The crowd wasn't sure if this was part of the act or something slipping off script. From where they stood, the lines were blurry, literally and metaphorically. Elvis hadn't looked up yet. He was still playing his part, microphone in hand, smile polished, voice smooth as velvet. But Priscilla, she was frozen. Not with fear, but with hope. Hope that this risk would pay off, that she would get a flicker of real connection, that for once she'd interrupt the show enough to make it stop. Instead, everything sped up. The crowd's reaction started to change. Some were laughing nervously. Others seemed offended. Some leaned in, waiting for a punchline. It was chaos wrapped in confusion, and she was at the center of it. And still, he didn't look at her. The lights were hot. The music kept playing. Her heart was pounding. Her plan had worked. She had everyone's attention, except his. She leaned closer, whispered, almost begging, "Kiss me. Just kiss me so I can sit down." Her voice cracked beneath the calm. Her smile trembled. This wasn't bold anymore. It was exposed, raw, vulnerable. Elvis didn't budge. He didn't yell. He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just kept singing, cool and composed, like she wasn't even there. Like the moment she built with so much care didn't even deserve acknowledgement. It was cruel in its calmness. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the humiliation, not the scandal, but the indifference. The silence from the one person she wanted to hear. She stood there, surrounded by lights and music and strangers, feeling more naked than her disguise could ever suggest. The crowd saw scandal, or comedy, or confusion. But what was it really? Was this bravery or desperation, or both? That's the question no one could answer, except maybe Priscilla herself. And in that moment, frozen on stage, cloaked in mystery, flooded with emotion, she probably didn't know either. Priscilla stood frozen under the spotlight, hot, blinding, and unrelenting, and still he wouldn't look at her. Elvis kept singing. His voice stayed calm and steady, ignoring the turmoil inches away. He didn't flinch or look at her, the man who once lit up at her sight now acting as if she was invisible, the cruelest part. To the crowd, it seemed like a tense joke, but to her it felt like quicksand, erasing her existence. She had risked everything for this moment, hoping for recognition but met with silence and humiliation. The audience laughed and whispered, seeing only drama, while Priscilla was left isolated, heartbreak settling in as she stood alone, unraveling under their gaze. She whispered again, "Kiss me, please. Just kiss me so I can sit down." There was a tremble in her voice now, a kind of plea that doesn't come from vanity. It comes from heartbreak. The crowd couldn't hear her words, but they could feel the tension. And Elvis, still unmoved, he was cool, effortless, in control. That's the thing about Elvis. Even when the moment went off script, he never did. He knew how to hold a room, how to keep the power. And in that moment, he used it. He didn't yell. He didn't confront her. He simply let her wait. One full song. She stood there, his wife, suspended in emotional limbo while the man she loved sang to thousands like she wasn't there. That wasn't just calm. That was control. Subtle, surgical control. And when the song finally ended, he didn't scold her. He didn't laugh. He smiled, that smile, the one the world knew so well. Then he turned toward her, reached out gently, and kissed her. A long, dramatic kiss. To the audience, it was a twist, a reveal. That wasn't just some mystery woman. It was Priscilla, the wife. The crowd erupted with cheers, applause, whistles. It was the kind of reaction any performer would crave. He had turned a near scandal into a standing ovation. But what no one saw was her face. Because while the crowd was roaring, Priscilla was crumbling, quietly. Her cheeks burned, not just from the lights, but from the slow realization that she'd been used as part of the act. Her moment of truth had been folded into the performance like just another beat in the show. That kiss wasn't affection, it was punctuation. It ended the scene. It let him walk off clean. Priscilla smiled. What else could she do? But inside, something cracked, because this hadn't been a joke to her. This had been her last chance to reach him, and instead of pulling her close out of love, he let her dangle in front of thousands before claiming the moment as his own. He introduced her to the crowd, finally, as his wife. Not as a punchline, not as a fan. But it didn't matter by then. The damage was already done. That kiss sealed the moment for them, but for her, it was a curtain call she never asked for. She walked back to her seat slowly, heels tapping like a quiet retreat. The audience laughed, clapped, moved on. But for Priscilla, that walk was heavy, the weight of 1,000 unsaid things pressing down with every step. People will say it was playful, that it was just Elvis being Elvis. But those who felt the sting of being unseen by someone they love, they know better. That moment wasn't just a stage prank gone too far. It was a snapshot of their marriage, a dynamic built on silence and spectacle, love wrapped in distance, affection delivered on a schedule. She gave him everything, her youth, her loyalty, her heart, and in return, she became part of the performance. This was how it worked. He held the spotlight. She waited in the wings. And when she tried to step forward to rewrite the script, he reminded her, gently, charmingly, but undeniably, who the star was. So yes, the kiss looked sweet, but behind it lived a cold war of emotions, of unmet needs, of unspoken hurt, of a woman desperately trying to matter in a world built around someone else. And maybe that's what makes this story linger. Not the kiss, but everything that came before it. After that night on stage, things didn't magically change. Priscilla wasn't angry, just tired of being invisible. That on-stage kiss didn't fix things, it revealed a deeper truth. Love had become performance. So she stopped waiting. She changed her image, embraced boldness, and wore confidence like armor, not for attention, but to finally be seen. Each dress, each detail, each risk was a message, a question whispered without words. Are you looking now? And sometimes he did look. Sometimes he smiled or gave her that knowing glance. Sometimes his friends even made comments, whistling or teasing, and she'd catch that flicker of pride in Elvis's eyes. For a moment, it felt like winning. But it was complicated. Elvis adored Priscilla, but only on his terms. He was proud of her beauty, yet grew possessive when others noticed. Their relationship became a constant push and pull, affection mixed with control. She learned to play her part, adapting to the role fame demanded. But behind every smile, she felt alone, like a prop in his story. The public gestures, the compliments, they often felt scripted, part of an image, not genuine love. While the world worshipped him, Priscilla quietly held everything together, fading into the background of a life that revolved around a man who belonged more to the crowd than to her. And yet, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she had hope. Because every once in a while there was a real moment. A flicker of the man she fell in love with. A soft touch. A private joke. A late-night conversation that reminded her of the boy from Germany who once made her feel like the center of the universe. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between, and eventually she began to realize that being seen wasn't enough. She needed to be valued, respected, loved for real, not just for show, and that's what that onstage moment had always been about. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a cry for attention, it was a woman who had been waiting for too long finally stepping into the light, not to steal it, but to remind him that she was still standing there. Because when someone lives for the applause, when they thrive in the eyes of the world, it's easy to forget the person who's clapping the loudest behind the curtain. The one who never asked for fame, only for presence, for connection, for real love. That night on stage wasn't the end of their story, but it was a turning point. A moment that revealed the truth so many couples feel but rarely say out loud, that love without attention, love without effort, starts to feel like absence. And while the world saw the moment as cheeky, funny, maybe even romantic, the reality was much heavier. That kiss might have looked like a happy ending, but to Priscilla, it was the beginning of the end. Not just of a prank, but of a version of herself she could no longer keep pretending to be. Because when affection starts to feel like performance, eventually you stop auditioning. That kiss on stage? Most people remember it as a sweet surprise, a playful moment between a husband and wife. But now you know, it was so much more than that. It was a quiet scream, a last attempt to be seen, a single moment that captured the heartbreak of loving someone who belongs to the world while you're just trying to hold on to what's left of us. Priscilla's story isn't just about Elvis. It's about anyone who's ever stood in the shadow of someone they love, anyone who's tried to keep a connection alive while feeling like they're fading out of frame. Sometimes we make bold moves to feel visible again, and sometimes those moves cost more than we expected. If you've ever loved someone who stopped looking, if you've ever made a risky choice hoping to bring them back, you're not alone. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Subscribe for more untold truths behind the legends we think we know, and in the comments tell us. Was Priscilla's move a moment of courage or heartbreak, or maybe Both?